Hi everyone, it's Pauliina Meskanen together with Simo Kaartinen.
Hello everyone.
Here today from Wave.ventures. Welcome to our second episode of Wavecast. Today we will take a deep dive into the field of MedTech together with Surgify, one of Wave.ventures' first investments back in 2017. And we are very excited to have here with us today Visa Sippola, one of the co-founders of Surgify.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe we start from the very basics. What do you do at Surgify?
Well, we do we go very deep into surgery, surgical technology, and our mission is to make bone surgery safe, reduce suffering of the patients, save lives, as a matter of fact. Of course, also to optimize the treatment now that we have huge pressure on the healthcare system at the moment. And our sort of technology enables bone cutting during surgeries without damaging soft tissues, very important ones such as nerves, blood vessels, central nervous system structures. And bone surgery is actually nowadays almost half of all surgery. So if we also count in the dental industry or field of dentistry, I could claim that at least among surgical technologies we have one of the most broadly sort of like applicable technologies that we're developing.
How did you come up with the idea, and what drove you to start a company?
So we're actually a university spin-off company. And before starting Surgify, I was a PhD student at HUS neurosurgery department, so here in Helsinki. And I saw a lot of surgical procedures there, and unfortunately also a lot of complications. So what drove into this Surgify, or becoming a startup entrepreneur, I would say sort of like it might be some kind of sum of, different events, luck as well. However, I think for all people who have been involved in Surgify, there is one common factor, which is really wanting to develop surgery into a better and safer and let's say treatments into a better direction, and really to develop something new. And the technology itself, so before building the first prototypes of the product that we're now launching soon, we used to work on a couple of different, or let's say alternative solutions with the team and with my co-founders. And so we have some working experience together, and it was quite interesting actually, the path to this like very small, like easy to use technology, because we started from something that was like this size, I would say. And when we started to try it and got some feedback from clinicians, I think it was quite clear, which direction we should go.
And going back to the very early stage, as you mentioned that your origins are in the research, and you have actually got also new business from research funding from Business Finland, so like so-called Tutli funding. Yes. So could you maybe open up that process, how that was throughout?
Well, Tutli has been a really groundbreaking, let's say, achievement for Surgify. And it has been a really important step for us back in the days. I have sometimes thought that would we actually exist, at least as such, nowadays if we wouldn't have received this really important TEKES funding. Could be, but we might be in a different situation because, getting, for example, angel investors in very, very early stage isn't easy as well. So Tutli was actually recommended to us by Aalto University Innovation Services. And before that, we were looking for like research funding, actual research financing, and we submitted a huge chunk of applications for research funding because Shahab, who is our CTO and who was looking for a master thesis topic actually when we started this, he sort of he needed to finalize his master's thesis. We wanted to study this topic, but it wasn't actually too long ago that the final sort of like a negative application came back from
What was the reason
some
for
of
that?
these. I think also the reason why we didn't get like research funding was that this was already in the beginning pretty applied. So I think this, for example, Tekestutli instrument was much better fit for us. Yeah. So it wasn't basic research at any stage, I would say.
Now that you mentioned that you have, that you have also co-founders. So how did you build your team in the first place?
I would say our team building has been driven. It has been really like need-based in many ways. We have needed every single team member, and when I think about it, they have really come at a very sort of like a right phase on board, and the four co-founders started to actually collaborate fairly early on, and I had the clinical background, and Shah was of course a mechanical engineer. Then our third co-founder Juho had a business background, so he was studying actually both industrial engineering and finance, or at least in the economy school. I think he was actually accounting instead of finance. But then the fourth co-founder Jukka had experience in regulatory regulatory work and management in actually both startup environment and in a corporate GE healthcare. So it's somehow clear, when you connect the dots, this is what you need for making a medical device an actual marketable device. And somehow then of course later on we have expanded the team, and I'm very proud of it at the moment, and of course we have also got some very, say, experienced people on board lately.
So basically you are saying that you need certain type of talents in a MedTech company. You need to have the legal experience, and you need to have the medical experience, the financing and everything in place before you can move on.
Yeah. Okay. I would say that there might be very early in the product development process even some critical things to take into account. So I would say that of course the skill set is different many ways. I wouldn't sort of want this to be a disencouragement for anyone to go into the medical field. Quite the contrary, but it's really like a multidisciplinary field where you really need to combine many things, and medical sciences and the regulatory aspect is strong, and somehow it really acts as a framework from the beginning of the product development as well.
Speaking of the regulatory aspects, since we all, as you said, it's very profound and it's very much present in the product development and in the everyday operations in any MedTech or health tech company. Yeah. So how do you deal with that in that regulatory framework with very limited resources as a startup company?
Yeah. I think there are lean ways to do regulatory stuff, and now it shouldn't be forgotten that it really also acts as a backbone a structure that is supposed to help the company to deliver a safe, high quality product that answers the customer needs. So it's all about that in many ways. And if you do it correctly, I mean, you can actually save time. This is a thing that has been discussed also widely lately. So let's say also if you think about it, if you have a proven, well-functioning process on how to map the needs, make a design and test it, probably iterate, then obviously it can actually be a great benefit. But quality, you know, it should be built in, and it should be a mindset, maybe instead of somehow like a purely legal framework. In a startup company, there are also possibilities to communicate things regarding the regulatory work in a much more, let's say, lean way, build the quality management system, get feedback, improve the quality management system actually as a much higher pace, faster pace than a big corporate can do. So startup can have a lot of also, let's say, competitive advantages in there as well.
So the regulatory framework actually acts as an kind of like a quality assurance benchmark for you, and then you can improve from that if you want to.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
Nice.
a very, let's say, logical process where you each step sort of record, you know, the input in your product from customers, for example, and then of course how you have built it or why you have built it as you have, and then how it has done after that. So
Okay, so maybe we can discuss a little bit about the customers and the industry. When you think about a normal kind of like a software startup, you're agile and you're moving fast and you're breaking things. Is it possible in the healthcare industry, which is kind of slow and traditional in many ways?
yeah, it's let's say it's a little bit different scenario, of course, but the same principles apply. And the key in developing a product like ours is really to break it, develop it, iterate it fast in simulated conditions. So there are a lot of options for that nowadays as well, which are not necessarily that costly actually. So that is really, really important as far as possible, of course. And then you need to, of course, reach a little bit further point in the product development before like launching compared to a software startup in a non-medical field. But the good thing is, of course, that usually also your valuations are probably much higher already at that stage. So it's a little bit also like
It's a trade-off.
Trade-off, exactly. But let's say there are still similarities when you launch, so you will never be able to launch a perfect product. And as a matter of fact, still you will need to launch some kind of minimum feasible product, and the work continues after you have launched it. Of course, the question is that do you want to do million procedures with it right away? That's one question, of course, you should think about, but you will need to try to launch it fast, and nowadays it's also becoming mandatory for companies, and this is actually the critical part is not even that much if you think about it, you know, what you sort of do before the launch, but actually what you do after the launch is really important. And the EU legislation is being updated at the moment for medical devices, and one of the important things are some new requirements also for following up the performance on the market and collecting actively feedback from your customers. Obviously, that's something that any company would want to do anyways, but apparently not all companies do that well nowadays, so it's becoming a requirement. But based on that feedback, you will need to monitor your product, you will need to improve your products and your services as well constantly. So there are a lot of similarities as well.
Who are your main customers and how does the kind of like sales process look like? Do you do work with another vendors, like big players who could distribute your product? Or what kind of aspects do you need to know when you are entering the medical field?
There are of course a couple of ways to do this, which might be sort of, equally good as well, or one of them will turn out to be better than the other. Of course, we still need to keep doors open, and as mentioned, we are now targeting to launch early next year. So these things are really approaching quickly. I would probably lie if I said that I would know exact answer to your question, that which sort of commercialization model will work the best for Surgify. So we will see.
Do you think that there is a demographical difference in the countries, that in the US you need to do something different than in Finland?
Yes, there is, and there will be different approaches. So of course we want to take it easy, start sort of small, and many of the, let's say, wiser people who we have talked with have really highlighted the fact that it is important to prove your business model in preferably limited setting, then have it all spread out with margin growths, let's say. So we will focus strongly, but what I can say that definitely the user and the primary profile of a user is a university hospital, and that is good because a huge number of these procedures are centralized in a few huge centers, especially in the Nordics. So of course that, for example, makes like direct sales efforts pretty much feasible, at least in the very beginning. But it's not like this everywhere. So as you mentioned, there of course will be some different approaches than to other countries.
As the university hospitals are one of your main customer groups, do you collaborate with them already, like prior to actually then like selling directly to them? So for example, already during the product development process?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a lot. And we have a very big number of surgeons who have provided us feedback during the product development process. And that has been super valuable, because I remember this very clearly when we built some of the first prototypes of the device. We went to show it to a surgeon, and it was this kind of drill that doesn't cut the soft tissues, and he tried it and he was like, wow, it really doesn't cut the soft tissues. And then we tried the bone with it, and he tried to start to cut the bone, and he realized it doesn't cut the bone either. So I mean those kind of things, we're just okay, yeah, that's a good point indeed. And then we needed to start working on that, and for example, these like general properties of the device regarding its really like essential performance. For example, quite importantly, the bone cutting. We have done a lot of work together with clinicians in really making it as smooth and, let's say, similar also to the existing devices as possible. Because those kind of details make a lot of difference in surgery.
All right, so essentially you are trying to minimize the friction of implementation when the actual user is taking this new device into the use.
Yes. Yeah, correct. According to studies, that is actually the number one problem for startups in this field. And that has really turned out to be super critical question. Because you can imagine that, even like small change in the treatment like workflow or surgical workflow is first of all a risk for everyone and for the treatment results. Secondly, it costs and takes time to implement, so even the small changes. And now if you bring a box into the OR with some fantastic technology in it, the thing is that the hospital will need to buy the box. They will need to train the surgeons who have probably been using another type of box for 25 years. And you need to train the nurses and people who take care of the logistics and everything. And actually, quite interestingly, for many software solutions, this is a big issue because software isn't easy. That might actually be also known for many, at least Finnish people now, that there have been these Apotti projects ongoing for ages, and that is why we came up with this kind of, let's say, like a disposable plug-in, like a, let's say, add-on hardware solution.
Rather than the whole drill.
Yes, yes. But now, of course, there are significant possibilities in also expanding, using this also as a platform in robotic surgery. We have actually received interest in that because our first product can be used as such in robotics as let's say like a safe cutting method or technology for bone surgery robotics, and of course data collection sensor systems also from the interface, so bone soft tissue interface. So there are many possibilities, and you cannot, of course, that well separate software and hardware anymore.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. What do you consider as your future directions? What are the next steps for Surgify to go forward?
Yeah. When we look at the big picture, I think the field where we can really sort of cause a disruption in the industry is the robotic surgery. It's not drills or handheld equipment or anything like that. It's robotics. So we're really interested in that. And as it turns out, the technology could also be extremely useful, even like an enabler technology in many types of robotic procedures. So we are really much, of course, looking forward also to contribute to that development. And there's a lot going on in there at the moment. So I think that is going to be the biggest added value that we can, let's say, bring to the society, hopefully.
Yeah. And how far is that future? Are we going to have those already next year or within 5 years? It's
those
now. Awesome.
Technologies exist, and also we can contribute to those, as mentioned, even in the present moment, but regarding your question, how long it would take for robotic surgery to become really common practice, it's hard to say, but hopefully not too long. We have a tremendous pressure of increasing the safety, efficiency, and let's say economics of healthcare, and robotics is gonna really be a big part of that. But unfortunately, I also must say that for it to become really common practice, it might take some years still. But meanwhile, also Surgify is contributing to the traditional procedures performed in ORs.
Do you think that kind of like the next biggest innovation in the field is going to be some sort of software or self-help app, or is it in the hardware side of the industry? What do you think? Or is it a combination of those two?
I think everything is going to be a combination. There are many signs that also being a hardware startup is fortunately becoming easier and easier. It might as well be that we're going to 3D print our products soon. New products or even mass produced products. So that is very important. Internet of Things, and of course this kind of like a mechatronic solutions and combination indeed of software and hardware, I think is important. But of course, one of the most important reasons probably why being a hardware startup has been so difficult is that the cycles are longer than in software. Making the products is more difficult, but as technology is progressing, there are of course many solutions to that as well. So I think and I hope that innovation happens in both, and also that these two things contribute to each other. As I mentioned, for example, robotics, it is often said that in robotics the hardware side is the limiting factor many times. So software is easy in that sense, that it's easy to develop and also implement to those systems, but the hardware side is what really needs to be sort of improved. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of room for digitalization, so I would say both.
And as the life cycles are longer on the hardware side, how does this affect to the funding of a startup from kind of a financial point of view?
Well, first of all, I would say that the life cycle doesn't necessarily need to be longer. So, for example, we made more than 200 iterations of this product in, I think, 2.5 years' time, a little bit less. So it wasn't maybe that long either. So it really also depends on the hardware. But there's of course some extra pressure on, or let's say some different questions from a venture capital point of view for hardware startups, leading often to specialized in investments, and that VCs are also taking or specializing in hardware or in medical field. There's a big bunch of biotech VCs as well. Biotech may be a little bit different than MedTech, what we're working on at the moment. But always, of course, the key thing is to find the right investor and also to get input from that investor and contribution to your company. So especially in the Finnish landscape, I would be happy to see even more. There have been some really positive developments, obviously, lately, but even more VCs who are really also specialized in this. But now it seems that some VCs are sensing the sort of like a open space or market for these types of investments in the Nordics, and which is a great thing. But in a very brief, as a very brief answer to your question, I think the finding the right investors, and of course from the investors' perspective than the companies you feel comfortable with. Obviously, I think is the key in here.
So how has the funding path so far looked for Surgify?
So we received our very first funding in 2015. It was a small like pre-seed grant from Aalto, 20,000 euros, which enabled us to actually build a couple of these very like I would say ancestor prototypes of what we have right now. And we applied for Tutli funding, and we got 500,000 in January 2016. As mentioned, this was a really important milestone for us, and of course it's sort of like a non-dilutive funding. However, Aalto University became a shareholder in the company as well afterwards, like a small shareholder, but it was really good for us and for the project overall. And we closed our first private funding actually with Wave and another investor focused in MedTech in summer 2017, which was our first sort of like commercial or let's say private pre-seed funding, which then led to closing of the seed funding in October same year, 2017. And that has actually, coupled with some Business Finland or additional Business Finland research and development funding, brought us to this stage. We did receive Horizon 2020 phase 1 as well recently. So it has been sort of like a combination of private and public financing, and of course, needless to say, for fellow entrepreneurs or people interested in entrepreneurship, please explore these Business Finland funding opportunities, because there's really good sort of opportunities in there. But now we are raising the Series A funding round, so we're targeting to close it early next year. And the target of that round is then to actually enable like scaling the sales growth. So it would be like a growth financing for Surgify, and we're now targeting 5 million euros in total. And there has been, I would say, great interest in Surgify by far. So I'm really positive about it. And of course, usually closing a round takes some time. So also we need to proceed quickly with that as well. But we are happy still at this stage to discuss with even potential new interested VCs. But that is what we're working on now, and of course that would then enable a whole new phase of Surgify, and then realizing the potential of this technology in surgery.
Great. I think we have covered a lot of good topics today, and thank you, Visa, for joining us in Wavecast. And for the listeners, if you have any topics you would like to hear in the future, please reach out to us, and we'll make time for those. Thank you. Bye.